The feed is live.
Hi.
Just give it a couple of minutes for it to catch up.
That's fine.
Brilliant. Just get this shared onto a few pages. Hi guys, if you're just joining, we're just the feed's just gone live. Just doing the bits and bobs, getting it out there and shared.
Hopefully the team should be doing the same and sharing it there as well. So
Yeah. If you can, guys, give it a share.
yeah, please. As we always say, hand in man club, you know. If we can reach out one man.
Yeah. I'm going to share this to my page, my personal page. I see that there are 4 people watching anyway. Here we go. That is on my feed. Hi guys, welcome to the Accidental Journalist Live and Undrugged episode 25. Today's episode, as always, is sponsored by No Means City Clothing and Armour Scaffolding, but also my series sponsor now is Jeffries, and we're also in collaboration with HMP Connections on Facebook. Tonight we are speaking with Jay Haston, all the way over in Scotland, sunny old Scotland, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about his life, and then we're going to be talking about some deep core subjects that really affect men. Hi, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure, Jack. It really is a pleasure to be on and talk to you and your audience and anybody else that's listening, because what we're talking about is subjects that are really, really close to my heart, subjects that I've been affected by, and as you'll find out, is an integral part of my story, my self-destruction and my recovery. So, brilliant. I mean, right now I'm the co-chair of the Hearts Race National Council Lived Experience, and I'm a project manager for the Wave Trust as well, and ambassador for the Wave Trust. So that's for the 70-30 campaign to reduce adverse childhood experiences by 70% by 2030. But I'll get to that. So
brilliant, mate. I just want to find out a little bit about you before we go into some of the more deeper stuff. So can we just go back to the start and where it all started for you, where this journey started?
Well, the journey started. Well, I suppose you got where life's journey started. Where this journey started. This journey started for me around about 6 years ago. It started when a series of me having had an addiction to cocaine and hiding that from my wife, and my wife having mental health problems, and probably I was using to escape. It culminated, and things just, we had to sort things out. So my wife was like, "You need to sort yourself out." So I stopped it, and as you see in the newspaper, I started like models and stuff like that. But my wife was going through a fight. She started a year later. She ended up starting. She filed a complaint against her abuser, because that, to get to the root cause of her trauma. Because what we found out is when I end up getting help. So I'll start off with me. There's that much to it, Jack. Honestly, there's so much. I basically live in trauma. That's what I say. I live in trauma. My journey turned around for me when I was in therapy. you know, to cut it short, I ended up in therapy. I ended up in the only male group therapy that was sanctioned up at the NHS up at St John's in Livingston. And I found myself there after living a life of addiction and with 18 miscarriages, a tumultuous marriage, and I'll get to that, and adverse childhood experiences, stuff that happened in childhood. And it was in that group therapy session, sitting with other guys, that I realised that all my problems could be addressed if only I was to speak out. Because I thought I was the only person in the world that felt that way. I felt broken, I felt damaged, I felt, you know, I actually described myself to my therapist at one of our first sessions as me and my wife as damaged goods. We held each other together. That was my view of myself. I totally, it was gone. How I ended up there, rewind back 6 years, I think, 2009, and my stepfather died. He died right in front of me. He took his last breath right in front of me, of cancer. And I think what happened there is I took a proper breakdown. I think that all the memories and what happened to my real dad all came flooding back, and I got a double dunt basically because I never grieved my real dad. I was only, it says 3, I was actually 2 going on 3 when I did the maths. I've been telling him for years I was 3-year-old. I was actually only 2, so we'll clear that up tonight on this episode. I was 2-year-old, but it was then that I realised that it was that was ruling my life. I'd always known that there was something wrong with me, and I just wasn't right. And, you know, even as a child in 1984 on my medical records, all it's got is behavioural problems. You know, that's it, nothing else. You know, I never got, nowadays I would have probably got a diagnosis like I have now, a complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But I took it really hard. I took it real hard. That was when I got heavy addicted and found myself really relying on it to the point where it was costing me 250 quid a day, 250 quid a week, sorry, not a day. I wish I could be that rich. But it was basically all my wages. I had a job at the time, I was driving, and as soon as the weekend came, then it was starting to seep into during the week, and it was destroying my life. It was destroying my life. The person I was having an existential crisis. I didn't like who I was. I was playing the tough guy, so to speak. It was a mask. I paint that mask on my hand now. It was a mask I had on, and I always had to be the centre of attention. I always had to be the craziest guy. I had always had to be the guy who would walk into 30 other guys and not care what happened. I think about it now, real scary stuff. You know, I could end up dead. I have been dead 3 times actually. I'll get to that as well. I'm a walking statistic, so I am. But one night I just remember just saying to myself, I'm tired. I'm done with this. The knee pains had started as well. I started getting problems with my knees. I had to get taekwondo, which was a real blow to me. Football was a non-starter for me. I couldn't play anymore because my knees were getting sore. So slowly, bit by bit, my life was starting to fall apart. You know, the social side of stuff started going away. I started getting anxious about it because I hadn't been in a few weeks. And then it spiraled out of control. I never knew why I was getting flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks. I kept going to doctors with depression, anxiety, you know, the usual, and antidepressants. And one night I said, F it. And this is, I use this word to doctors and professionals regularly. I say there is a switch in people when they hit it, and I call it the F it switch. When they hit that switch, that is it. There's no turning back. I wasn't thinking about anybody else. I wasn't thinking about, I was, but not in the right way. What I was thinking was, the world would be better off without me. I'm tired, and in a selfish way, I didn't want to be here anymore. And you know what? I justified it saying, my kids will be better off without me. They'll grow up. Somebody will look after them. You know, I basically was passing the buck. When I look back, that's what I was doing. I was trying to pass the buck. I went round the petrol station and I sat at the petrol pump for about 5 minutes contemplating it. And then I just stood up and I lifted the petrol nozzle, lit my lighter and put my lighter up the nozzle. I didn't know that the woman had to click the machine. So none of the petrol came out. So I'm trying to click all the different machines and I've got light. And this is when I turned to God. This is when I turned to God, really. I started conversating with God anyway. It's because I don't know how I'm still alive for that day. It didn't happen. It didn't blow up. So I sat in front of the the door. It was at night time, so the door was locked, so you couldn't get in. So I tried to get in. The door was locked. The wee woman, she phoned the police, and I remember sitting there. But then a car came in, and she let the guy pour petrol. So I've scrambled about in my pockets. I've found a hanky. I've lit it, and I've ran towards the car. And I'll never forget this. The guy, he couldn't have put much pressure on me at all, but he sat me down again, and he said, "Son, you didn't want to die today." So if that guy hears this, and I say this all the time, if you're out there and you remember me that night, I want to thank you. You saved my life. Because 5 minutes after that, the police turned up, and two policemen, for the life of them, could not get me in the back of that car. They couldn't manhandle me. For some reason, it was like superhuman strength I had. I had that in my head that they were going to take me away and lock me up. That wasn't what I wanted to be. I'd done enough of it as what it was. That was just going to be more punishment for me. So eventually, they got me to walk in front of the police car all the way around to my mum's house. And they got into my mum's, and obviously they went, and mum said, "You need to get me to the hospital straight away, or we're going to detain him." So I remember going down to the hospital, and I went and I sat with a doctor for a wee while. And then the doctor sent me home. And it was at that moment I thought to myself, I went to stay with my nana for a couple of weeks, and I thought to myself, there's something seriously wrong with the system in Scotland. I've just went in there after trying to blow myself and a petrol station, openly admitted to them, some of the darkest thoughts imaginable, what I'd wanted to do to myself, what I wanted to do to other people. And they sent me home. And I just couldn't contemplate that, Jack. I couldn't contemplate that. I thought, there's something wrong with society. There's something wrong. And that was when I first started saying to myself, maybe there's something else you can do. So I started to look into education and stuff like that. And like I say, I was working. I held down a courier job for 4 years. I managed to hold down a job for 4 years. But then everything, like I say, it just came to a head. I'd been clean about a year. And then the wife, I ended up, I had to get her to deal with her demons. And as it happened to be, her demons related back to childhood as well. So as I was sitting in therapy, and I was 4 weeks in a therapy office, and I'm sitting in the therapist's office, and I'm like, right, I'm in a doctor's, I'm in the hospital, not the doctor's. I'm sitting with a therapist. I still didn't know why I'm here at this point, Jack, right? I just knew that go to the doctor's, tell them about referring me up to the hospital. So I says to her, Dr. Garen Moffat, I was like, why am I here? I was like, I'm no daft. I'm sitting in I called it a shrink's office at the time, a shrink's office where I shrink your doctor, Moffat, so you're a clinical psychologist. I was like, what's wrong with me? I was like, there's clearly something wrong with me, so what is it? And that was when she told me I had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And she told me about ACEs and about trauma. And for there, it was like pennies started dropping. It was like things started just falling into place. That explained that. That explained that. That explained that. And then my addictive and obsessive nature started taking over away from what I was doing, the self-destructing stuff. After I'd been in the group therapy and realised I wasn't the only man thought that way, my OCD took over. And I would love to say it was me. It was my OCD took over and took me on a mission to everything that's happened since. And what's happened since is there's been peer support groups open, there's been counsellors being put in the community, there's been a psychologist put in the local doctors, there's new groups opened up because of it. There's been events. I've had the privilege of speaking with some of the world's greatest speakers and ACEs. I am now, like as I say, I'm an ambassador for WAVE, a worldwide charity. We really are making a change. And I'm now also the co-chair of the newly announced Hearts of Ace National Council Lived Experience, which I am sure, and I've said this in my last video I've done, that will not be anything to do with me, but the fantastic people that are in that council will make it huge, and it'll be amazing, and it'll get a voice for lived experience for everybody, not just in Scotland, but in the full of the UK.
Yeah. So tell us about the National Council of Lived Experience. What does that entail?
So the National Council of Lived Experience was set up with two purposes really. One was the core purpose here is it's a anybody that comes faces. It's a peer support group first and foremost, with some cracking professionals in there and some real good people, some clever people. I sometimes sit and think, what am I doing? And I really do. I'm like, why am I in here? Some real clever people in there. And the mission is to change policy towards a trauma-informed society and help government to understand the impacts of childhood trauma and not so much ACEs, the toxic stress that a child can be put under, the impacts that can have on that child as that child grows up. And we've got an answer to that, and that is building resilience in 0 to 2-year-olds. But we can go into that if you want to talk about that. But it's been proven in the Republic of Ireland and Spain using a program called PCPS that we can build resilience into children. If we can do that between the ages of 0 and 2, then they are more likely to, if they encounter adverse childhood experiences, then they're more likely to make responsible decisions later on in life, i.e. they're less likely to turn out like me, they're less likely to turn to crime, turn to drugs, turn to suicide. They're more likely to deal with it more resiliently and go on and have a better quality of life. They'll never get over it, but they'll have more chance. It's been proven that they'll have more chance of going on. And if we can do that with all children, if we can create a trauma-informed society, including prevention, then by proxy, the drugs death rate will fall, because the drugs death rate in Scotland is absolutely ridiculous. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about as well. And the suicide rate in Scotland is absolutely ridiculous as well. It's that bad that nobody wants to talk about it. And we really do have to start talking about it.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I think we'd both agree, and I think a lot of people would agree with us that the whole mental health system in the United Kingdom isn't fit for purpose. It's broken. It needs reform. It needs looking at. That ties in with the prison service that needs reform, that needs looking at, because at the minute it's just about numbers and heads and funding. And that's it. They're not tackling things where they need to be tackled. And one thing that I've learned over the past few years is that trauma is the biggest part of that. And in order to get better in our lives, we need to tackle the trauma at the head. Otherwise, we'll just get caught in that loop.
You're absolutely spot on. The loop you're talking about is intergenerational trauma. Perfect example of that is a child grows up, sees their mum and dad battering, or sees the dad battering the mum, or the mum battering the dad. They grow up, they think that's normal. They go into society, 16, 17-year-old. They go out, the first thing they do when they get into a fight is hit the person. They do it badly, they end up in front of a judge. First thing the judge does is put them into juvie or the jail if they're 18. Now, my answer to that, and a lot of people's answers now is, how about the judges start saying to the people what happened to you and find out what happened to them? Because I'm pretty sure if the judge then found out that all that child had known, all that 17, 16, 17, 18-year-old had known was violence, then that's all they're going to go out in the world and repeat is the violence. Now, I'm pretty sure 3 months of therapy is cheaper than 6 months in the jail. And I'm not a rocket scientist, I'm not Einstein, or I'm not, I'm not the cleverest at maths. So, but I'm pretty sure that 3 months of therapy is cheaper than 3 months in the jail. And fair enough, if they're going to repeat after that, offend after that, then then let the law do its job. But we need to start asking first, Jack, especially with the 16 to 18-year-olds, but I'd even say 14 to 18-year-olds that are getting put into the juvenile systems and the court system. For example, there was 14,458 children who were either looked after or in care last year up to 1920. And these kids, if they're not looked after the right way, if they're not brought up the right way, if they're not got resilient adults in their life, that's 14,458 traumatic kids we've got going into our society already straight away. Now, to give you the bigger picture, we've already got 2 million children in the UK who are maltreated or suffer child abuse. And NSPCC are reporting rates increases up to 80%. We've got to address it at the root trauma. Some studies that were done on people who took drugs and substance abuse, 67% of them said they had traumatic childhoods. That's 7 in 10. The other 3 in 10 we could argue is, well, the suicide rate, there was 833 registered suicides in Scotland in the year 2019. 620 of them were men, 213 female. So there's 3 to 1 with the males. You know, that's why there's such an emphasis on male mental health, because men will not speak out. And I think, you know, it's hard for a man to speak out because I touched on it a few times. Emasculation is a big thing for a man. If a man feels emasculated, it's hardwired into our system, our DNA, that we're supposed to hunt, be strong, be the primal species. Society has drilled that into us and conditioned that into us. So especially in Scotland, I find we've got such a passive aggressive nature that you can say to your mate, I'm not feeling too hot, can I talk to you? And the answer you'll get is, get yourself sorted, get a grip of yourself, go and do some work, sink your teeth into that, you'll be all right. And you're just sitting thinking, man, I really was wanting to talk to you there, but you know what? Instantly, straight away, when you're in that frame of mind where you want to talk to somebody and you want to get something off your chest, serious, the last thing you need is a passive aggressive comment, because subjectively to you on a normal day that might have been all right, but on that day when you want to talk, you took that personal, and your mate's not interested in you. Therefore, your mate's not interested, your family's not interested. So I'll just not talk to anybody, and I just bottle up. And that's what we're dealing with, especially in Scotland, but all across the UK. And we've got to create, and that's why a trauma-informed society addresses that issue as well. A trauma-informed society would make it natural for a man to say, you know what, I acknowledge I need a bit of help. I'm struggling a bit here. You want to help me? And what we need as well is we need businesses to stop stigmatising people for it. And they say they didn't, but there is an awful lot of businesses out there, and people know it. And that's what the amount of people, 755 men came to Andy's Man Clubs up in the country on Monday night. Right? The NHS will tell you there's not that much of a problem with men's mental health, whatever. That's because these men aren't going to the doctors and talking about it. They're coming to places like Andy's Man Club, Men Matter, you know, and Men Matter Scotland and Glasgow, they do a great job as well. But these guys are going to peer support places to find safe spaces to talk out. So therefore, when the government are doing their wee checklist, they're going through their doctors and they're saying, well, there's no men registered as depressed or whatever there, so we're not going to release the funding. So it's a catch-22 situation. So what I always try and say is, look, if you don't want to talk to your doctor about it, at least phone up the doctor and say, listen, go and put it on my record, please, that I am feeling this way. Because at least that way, we'll get a better demographic and we'll be able to get some more funding released by the government. Because everybody wants to blame this charity for not doing that, or this government for not doing that, or this councillor or MP for not doing that. But what I've found with speaking with councillors and MPs is they've got their hands tied. Councillors have got their hands tied, and the MPs have got their hands tied. You know, so it's a vicious circle, and we've got to try and break it somewhere to break that intergenerational cycle that you were just talking about there, Jack.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, exactly what you said. The problem is that we, the prison system and the mental health system, there's too much money in that for them. So, you know, people get caught. All you need is a postcode to get out. So you get out, you go back into the same situation. It brings you back around and you end up back in. And that's how you end up institutionalized. Same with mental health. You go round in a circle, you break down, you ask for help, you don't get it, or you get a little bit and then you don't hear anything. It takes so long, and then you just end up going back round. The problem is that if you went into jail and our institutions, they tackled the problem there and then, right at its head, right at the trauma, where's that money going to come from? So it's not financially viable for them. But so it's left to people like us to have to educate that have been there. And it's exactly what you say. Some people call it toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And it is. It's very toxic. It's poisonous. We're conditioned to be a certain way, to feel a certain way, to think a certain way. I grew up in rural Yorkshire, so I know what it's, around mines and stuff like that. So I know what that pressure is like on a guy, and it's not just toxic to other people, but toxic to ourselves, because we're getting these traumas stacking up and we're not tackling them. So it's just one trauma after another, and then we end up broken. And often all we want to do is be validated, be recognized that we are suffering this problem, but then we get man up, stop living in your own drama, grow a pair. All these I've heard over the past 8 years.
Terminology is so important. It's so important. It really is. I actually emailed Jeremy Kyle about that. He actually told the young lad to man up and go and get a job. And I was looking at this young lad and I was watching him, and you could clearly see the young lad lacked self-esteem, he lacked confidence, and whatever, he might have been a scoundrel on the benefit system or whatever, but clearly the guy hadn't had a responsible male role model. And Jeremy Kyle, when he says to him, he was in his face shouting, "You need to man up." I emailed Jeremy Kyle's show and told him that he shouldn't be doing that. So he actually invited him on the show, but then it got cancelled. So, but it's them kind of things. And what it does is, Jack, and it's happened to me. Folk have done it to me. It takes you straight back to that inner child. It takes you straight back to that child that you were back then. And you might be the 6 foot man that you're standing there in front of that person, but inside you are back to that young small person. It's kind of like when you're back at school and the teacher's giving you a row and you feel like you've just shrunk and you want the ground to swallow you up. That's how men feel. They really do feel like that. And where it's come from, I don't know. Maybe the 2 world wars, because you look back in history and some of the greatest men in history, Julius Caesar, Marcus Aurelius, Alexander the Great, they've all wrote about crying to their councils. That means what they're saying is they've spoken about their problems to their councils, their friends, their trusted people, and they've cried about it. So if these people are classed as real men and they can cry, why can't we?
Exactly. This was a conversation I had with my teenage daughter on Saturday at the park while the others were playing, and she's a very strong, independent young girl. When she was saying about how she fears some men, she never fear me, but as a young woman, she has to fear men because certain men are still at that toxic level a lot more than we are led to believe. So she's really scared of suffering that. So and then she's like, well, are you sort of scared of other men? And I'm like, well, no, I used to be scared of what people thought about me. But no, I'm not. I'm not scared of them. I'm more likely scared of my own emotions, and that got me thinking. We do get scared of our emotions. Our emotional intelligence is at the beginning until we start to learn is very low, and because I have brain damage. Excuse me, I suffer. I don't always recognize emotion on other people, and it takes me a little bit longer to recognize it on myself. So it's something that I really have to think about. I can take a punch, or I've always been able to take a punch. That's in the upbringing, but it's the words that always got to me, and it's the emotions that always then drag me back down into poor mental health. And as men, we just bury them. We bury the traumas. We bury the bad feelings. We bury the grief. We bury the pain. And it just comes up and it poisons us from within. And we need to learn another way. I can't do it through violence anymore. My body's knackered. I can't do it through punch bags or boxing anymore. So I have to, this is the way that I do it, by talking to other people.
Yeah, I'm the exact same, Jack. This is the way I do it now, is by trying to help people by doing the videos and letting people inside my head to try and understand what it's like to be a man with emasculation problems, and I probably that one thing that probably no other man talks about, and that's the humiliating problems that come with the toxic masculinity. You know, the sexual problems. You know, the there's so many problems come with that toxic masculinity. You know, am I good enough? Constantly question yourself with that. Am I good enough? Am I good? Am I a man? Am I a real man? You know, these aren't healthy questions to be asking yourself. But then you're talking, we bottle it up. So then we ask, so why are we asking why the drug deaths are so high and why the stats are so high on suicide? Well, if men are forced to bottle it up, then they're turning to substances, whether it be alcohol or or drugs, and to cope, to release that, as I did, or they commit suicide, like as I tried to do. And what nobody ever looks at, and I call it the bleeding plaster, the drugs policy. It's a bleeding plaster. Let's keep firing 50 odd million, 100 million into the drugs policy and we'll sort it out. Well, you're not going to sort it out until you actually get back to the root trauma. And I truly believe that the other 33%, if there's 67% have acknowledged that they've got childhood trauma and that's led them to their substance abuse, I truly believe that at least the other 38%, at least maybe 2% could be due to genes or whatever. I truly believe the other 30% just don't know it was their childhood that's driven them to that. They don't know that it was the absent father or the neglectful mother or the sibling rivalry or the fighting or mental health problems in the house that's actually caused them to not open up to their fellow friends and brothers and ruined relationships. I mean, it's ruined relationships for me, Jack. You know, I've got friends, I've got acquaintances, I've got probably only 3 real friends that I've had for about 20 odd years, you know, and I struggle to keep relationships because, like you say, the emotional intelligence, what I've learned at 2, 3 year old, the neocortex is just forming, and that forms your basis of reality, basically. And at that age, technically, what happened to me was the devil got his hand on me, and that's the way I'll describe it, as the devil put his arm around me. And my dad was taken, and the devil put his arm around me, and he took me in. And then from there, I was just a vulnerable, scared boy on his own, afraid that, you know, I heard the conversations, obviously, about what happened, and I was just waiting for it to happen to me. And, you know, having 6 different schools didn't help. I got bullied. I was always a new guy. We moved through to West Lothian. I was 12-year-old when we moved through here. I was always a new guy. My family were tough. I was expected to be tough like my family, but I wasn't. It wasn't until I was maybe about in 3rd year that I realised that I wasn't going to break when a group of the villagers all jumped me at the school gates. I used to avoid it. I actually used to walk up by the railway. When I think about it, I could end up getting killed. I used to actually wait until the bell had went, sit in my class and wait until everybody for the local area in my town had left. And then I used to walk up the railway way home. And my mum and dad never even knew that until the newspapers. Well, my dad's gone, 2 of them. My mum never even knew that until the newspaper story. When the newspaper story, she said, "Why did you not speak out about it?" It's like, you know, your family, really, you know. And you know, God bless my mum. She'd done the best she could, but you know, it was a tough knock family. It was a hard family to grow up in, and some of the stuff I seen, the violence I seen, and stuff was just, it was normal to me. It was normal. And when I realised that I couldn't break, I then became the bully. You know, and I remember getting a message from my mate Simon, and he says to me, he says, "Jay," he says, "I can't believe you got bullied. I always saw you as the bully at the school." He says, and this is what really got to me. He says, "This other guy, I'll not say this other guy," he says, "He's actually in fear for his life of you." And that to me, this was into my recovery. This is only about 2 years ago. My heart sank. I thought, you know, still, I've done this. I've turned my life around. I've acknowledged that I could have done things better with my oldest laddie. He's 21, 22 this year. He's got 2 bairns, my grandbairns, you know. I acknowledge I could have done things a lot different. But see, to hear that somebody else was living in fear of their own life and knowing that they probably turned to drugs that because of me, that that hurt me more than anything that's hurt me. You know, it really did. It really stuck with me. And I thought to myself, you know, that was, and I took a wee dip after that. But that's just the sobering facts here. And that's what I tell every young guy that I would speak to is, you know, it's no glamorous. You know, the gang life, the thug life, the gangster life, the selling drugs. It's no glamorous. It's just going to end up with you getting hurt, stabbed, shot, end up in jail, or it's going to end up with you hating yourself at some point because you're going to find out that you're going to get nowhere in life.
Yeah. So how can we tackle that trauma? How can we stop ourselves from going further back down? How can we go up steps instead of down? How can we sort of put that into practice?
For us as adults, it's harder. Obviously, the more time that passes, the harder it gets. For example, I was in the hospital therapy for 4 years for them trying to unwire all the stuff inside my head. And I was fortunate to get that because it's hard to get hospital therapy. It's really, really hard. How do we deal with it? We've got to be there for each other. We've got to create a trauma-informed society. And by creating a trauma-informed society, by concentrating on prevention of adverse childhood experiences, the knock-on effect is that people, if they're trauma-informed, then they'll know how to deal with people. They'll know how to be caring and empathetic. 2 words, Jack. 2 words. And that's all it takes is caring and empathetic. If we can create a society like that, where men can talk to their mates like they can, like the 755 guys that turned up to the Andy's Man clubs on Monday night, if they can talk to their pals the way they can in the clubs, then we'll be in a far better place. How do we prevent it? With resilience. We create resilience in young children. And then, as I said, the answer's there. It's been proven, it's been shown. We create the resilience. But the problem with Boat Jack is this: £179 million was given to Scotland for well-being, health and well-being. None of that was ring-fenced for 0 to 3-year-olds. Absolutely none. Nada. Zero. You know, the actual, so the solution to our problem. Now, if we keep on just doing what we're doing, we're just going to keep on going round the circles. But if we didn't tackle the prevention at the 0 to 2, 0 to 3-year-olds, and down in England, they've got the Andrea Leadsom 1001 Critical Days report, if people want to look that up. It's really interesting. But 0 to 2-year-olds, if we can create resilience into them, then, as I said before, they will grow up in a society where they are more likely to offer help to people, be more sympathetic, listen, and even as far as like the veterans and sexual orientation, it'll be a more open society for people to speak out. So it can only be more beneficial. It can address racism. You know, there's so many things that a trauma-informed society can address. But if we didn't want to keep on repeating the cycle of intergenerational trauma, we've got to put some money into prevention into 0 to 2, 0 to 3-year-olds.
Yeah. So how do we? I mean, I've spoken to people who feel that because they've lived the life that they are stuck at a certain plateau in their life. So, you know, I know that we can tackle it in young children to stop that at the start. But how do we tackle it for people like us now?
Yeah, that's it. The first advice I would give is doctors, and then second of all is therapy. If some people are fortunate where their addiction will take them into workaholics, so they'll end up workaholics and they'll end up successful, but they'll still end up burnt out. You've got to talk about it, and talk about it with the right people. Talk about it with trauma-informed therapists. Talk about it with trauma-informed doctors, people who understand trauma. You know, if you can't find any of them, go to a peer support group where there's people who are trauma-informed, people who understand you, because that's the key, is being understood and felt understood. If you can feel understood and make somebody else feel understood, then you build a rapport, and from there we can start getting better. But what we need is we need the collaboration with education, we need the collaboration with social work, police, the justice system. We need them all to work together to support the adults, but mainly for the adults is therapy. And there's good charities out there like Wellbeing Scotland, the Bridge up here in Scotland anyway, the Bridge, and even my local community Pobeth, they do counselling projects, and you can go and see a counsellor and get help, and they can point you in the right direction and keep you on track. And I always say to myself, you've got to find purpose. You know, you can go to the therapist, they'll help you understand your problem, but then after that, you realise you're on a journey. You realise that this is something that you may have to live with for a long time. You may have to live with forever. But at some point, you know, you've got to find a bit of purpose. And if you can find purpose, that's the key to not living with it forever. You know, I hope I didn't live with it forever. I still come to that angle where I still have panic attacks. I still get flashbacks. I still get nightmares. I still have plenty of sleepless nights. The ghosts still come see me. They still come visit me. But I cope with them a lot better. That's the difference. Whereas before, I used to self-destruct, and I would turn to old bad coping mechanism like I've spoken about. Now I'll turn to a book. So it's a lot healthier. It educates me, even though I didn't take it in. At some level, it does take it in. We need more therapists. That's what we need. For the kids, we need psychologists in the schools. We need to catch the signs early. We need to catch the signs that there's abuse going on at home. We need to teach the kids to look out for signs. We need to get the social work to understand that young parents, especially, are still kids themselves. So they need as much support as possible. So there is no one answer. It's collaboration and identifying that key area of prevention, Jack.
I mean, I work a 12-step program. I've been around the 12 steps since I was 14 years old, and although the 12 steps help with tackling the addiction, and there are certain steps in there that help you look at people that you've hurt, and making amends and things like that. It doesn't really sort of tackle trauma, because this program was designed, I think it was 1929, something like that. So because this program has been around since then, it hasn't really changed. So, and not a lot of things was known about trauma back then. But I know in and out of addiction, and the one thing that's always brought me back to my knees is my past trauma. Untackled trauma, trauma that we don't even acknowledge that's there, that's sat sort of not even at the back of your mind, at the back of your soul, and it's waiting there to jump. It feels sometimes like you'll tackle one trauma and then it'll come jumping out. And these are the things that we find out when we talk to other people. I'm Yorkshireman, I can talk to anybody, but when it comes to talking about my feelings, it's only been over the past sort of few years that I've been able to do that publicly. The way that I describe it is that I was broken, and I broke myself at 8 years old. The trauma for me was being told I was adopted. I was loved, but I was adopted. And that gave me, the fear of loss, the fear of rejection, and all these things kept stacking up. And once you hit that first trauma, the other traumas just keep going. It can just be a little thing, and then it'll build up into a trauma, and it'll just keep pounding you until it takes you to your knees. So, working the 12 steps is a way to tackle your addiction at its core, but at the core of your addiction, and the reason that we use, and the reason that I used anyway, is because of the traumas that I lived. It was the rejection, the hurt, the pain, the grief.
The shame.
Grief is a big one for me.
Yeah, belief's a big one for me as well. Belief's a big one for me as well.
So how do we tackle? I know I've tackled them, but I want to. I want to open this up for people who really might be struggling to open themselves up to other people. That's the biggest step, to open yourself up to someone else, to just
it really is.
Be honest. You know, honesty has always been a big one for me. Not just honesty with other people, honesty with myself. And I've really struggled with that. So I want to sort of look at in this podcast. I want to look at some of the solutions, some of the steps that we can put into place to be able to deal with trauma, deal with hurt and grief and things like that. What are your thoughts on that, mate?
Well, the first thoughts on that is what I say. Let's create a national conversation around it. Let's have a national conversation and get everybody involved in it. Anybody that's interested in making the world a better place, society a better place, get them involved, get them around the table and get them talking about it. Let's have a huge conversation about this, and really open up, get everybody talking about it. Again, there's only so much you can do with therapists and doctors and peer support. Like you, it was spiritual for me. I always blamed God, but then I got to a point where I didn't normally talk about my religion and stuff, but I'm not religious, but I believe in God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost, and I always believed it was God's fault until the penny dropped. That I realised, well, without free will, Ken, we would just be robots. So I remember praying up to God and asking for His forgiveness. But at the same time, I can remember as well times where I've sat in bed and prayed for God to take my life that night in bed when I was sleeping, in return that my wife and kids had a better life than me. That's just some of the mindsets that I've been in. So how do we tackle that? Talking it, talking it, talking. It's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that. It's as simple as talking. The guy at the petrol station spoke to me. The police didn't. The woman inside didn't. The guy did though. He put his hands on me and he spoke to me. That saved my life that night. So it really is. It is complicated behind the scenes, and imagine with money in that. But for us to become a trauma-informed society, for us to address these problems, it really is as simple as being able to talk. And it's about being, when you're in your peer groups at the pub with your pals, it's about being big enough now to say, do you know what? That's not acceptable. If you hear your mate telling your other mate, man up, tell them that's not acceptable. If you hear somebody who's been abused getting told to go and, hang with themselves, stand up and say, that's not acceptable. If you hear, a woman getting hit or a guy getting hit, say that. Well, didn't put yourself in a dangerous situation, but didn't stand by. There's a favourite quote of mine, and it is bad things happen when good people stand idle. And that's what I like. If everybody done their wee bit, and that just that wee bit, and that's just keep their eye open a wee bit more, pay attention, take on a bit of responsibility as a human. We're all human beings. We're social animals. We're designed to live and love each other. Take that bit of extra time. Phone your mate. Phone your family members. Make sure they're all right. If they say I'm okay, get past that and say, I'll take this way. My good friend Andrew Feeney. No, I'm not asking if you're okay. How are you? And get people to open up. If you can get people to open up, and then they might tell you the most terrific of stories, that's all right. Give them the advice that, the standard advice, and that is speak to your doctor, get a therapist, go to peer support, talk to trusted friends, but most of all, talk out. Do not bottle that stuff up. If you're using, don't be ashamed of it. If you've recognized, if you've watched this video tonight and you've identified with some of the stuff you're spoken about, and you maybe never thought that it was because you grew up around your parents fighting or around seeing drug abuse or whatever, then and the pennies dropped tonight, seek that help. Phone the doctor, look out for the help, because that could be the key that you're looking for. But there's also what we're saying, what next then? Once you've identified it, how do we be happy, so to speak? I'm still looking for that answer, Jack. I have good days, I have bad days, the old cliche, good days and bad days. On my good days, I try and do what I can, when I can, while I can. It's the kind of motto I live by. And purpose, where did I find my purpose? I found it in Jesus. I didn't find it in religion. I'll be honest, I didn't find it with Catholicism or Protestant or anything like that. I found it in God and Jesus Himself, and I found it through Stoicism. I found it as I was learning psychology, learning hypnotherapy, and learning NLP and all these stuff about the mind and about how I could try and keep myself on a level basis and grounded. I learned that all this stuff went away back to Descartes' famous quote, cognito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And that's the basis of all NLP and techniques and cognitive behavioural therapy to this day. So I delve into the writings of Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and Seneca, and I find them fascinating. So that's kind of my purpose, so to speak, is helping other people and passing on the knowledge that I've learned in them books to the people that I come across and say to them, look, you might not find it in them, but pick up a book, try and find something that you used to be passionate about when you were younger. For instance, me, I used to collect the wee models, and I went back to that. I went back to looking for the wee models and finishing off the collections that I'd done, and I'd done it. And it sort of, as I stopped taking the bad stuff and I started getting closer to finishing off my wee collections, I started getting more excited about my collections and thought less about going back and I knew I didn't even think about that. And no, I only buy. I collect. I'm sitting. I can show you my box right in front of me. I've still got boxes here that haven't even been opened. It's absolutely ludicrous. You know what I mean? It's ludicrous. So I've had to stop myself from buying them. But again, that comes down to my addictive personality and OCD again with books and collectibles now. But it's about you've got to find something purpose. I used to coach kids football. I can't do that now because of my knees. My knees are goosed at Cammy. I've got a disease in my knee pads and I've got lax ligaments, which is the early signs of osteoarthritis. So I'm past. I can't play football with my wee boy. That depresses me. That gets me down. So it's about. It's not about thinking. I can't do this anymore. It's about thinking, what can I do now? What can I do to fulfill myself? What can I do to give myself purpose? Get involved with get involved with what's going on. Get involved with the Way of Trust. Get involved with your local charities. Get involved with your local community. Help out. There's another famous saying, like, it takes a village to raise a child. I would love society to get back to that because right now, if we take the blinkers off, we're not in a place like that now. You wouldn't trust your way out in the streets. It's just, you just wouldn't trust them with the neighbours. It's not happening. It's not happening. I'm overly protective of my kids at the best of times, but I'd love to see society back, and I'll probably not live to see it. But if we can start the ball rolling now, if we can be the generation that starts prevention, we might just be the generation that started to end the child abuse. And then by proxy, suicides and drug abuse as well will be addressed. One of the things that fascinates me about suicide, there was a study done, and what they found out was if they publicised if a celebrity committed suicide, that suicide rates spiked. And this is why they don't talk about it. Now, what I would say is, well, why don't we use the same argument that we use with TV and violence? At a certain point, people become desensitized to it. So they're not going to, not everybody's got to go out with a gun and go and shoot people because they've watched Die Hard on the telly. So if we can get to a point where we're talking about it and normalise it and desensitize the word suicide, desensitize it with terminology, then I think we'll see real progress.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, trauma like addiction is a disconnection. It's a disconnection from yourself. It's a disconnection from God. It's a disconnection from your family. It's a disconnection from life, from reality. And when we looking at that and we start working on those things, then we can start building that connection back. For me, the way that you mentioned about Jesus, that is a big thing for me. My faith, handing my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him. That's the biggest one for me. I have to do that every day because I know that keeps me humble. It's the how, isn't it? The honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I have to practice that every day. God is the big grounder for me. My church community, my church family is a big part of my recovery. They were there when I thought that I'd lost everything. Even down to the things, the connection that God puts back into place. I found out that one of my leaders at my church designed a 70-30 poster.
There you go.
That's the connection. We already had that connection because we've got that, that life. We're informed on that, and we have the common goal. But God just keeps adding to these connections. Who'd have thought that, a guy in a small Norfolk town, leader of a small, quite a large church, would design a poster for something up in Scotland that would result in ending up in me speaking to you. These are these connections that have built up. The stories, the are the links between, and it builds this chain. And we need to do that. More men need to step out. I do feel for women and mental health, but I'm not a woman. I don't always understand women. I won't be able to understand women to a certain point. So, but what I do understand is being a man and going through what I went through and dealing with that as a man. So I need to concentrate on mental health for men, speaking with men, building that connection with men, because you're right. When we have that toxic seed, and that's all it is. It could be a seed, that toxic seed, that whether it's the devil that breaks that link in the chain, whether it's his influence or whatever, we need to be tackling that at its very core and helping men, because suicide rates are higher in men, heart attacks are higher in men, certain cancers are higher in men, stress related illnesses and diseases and cancers that come with that higher in men. And I really feel that as men who are in the process of educating ourselves and educating others, it is our responsibility to push further, because men are just, I maintain the fact that women are the stronger sex to a point, because there's things that have just broken me as a man, and we don't deal with things half as well as women do. And it's really a passion of mine. What you said about collecting, mine is VHS and retro stuff. I had over 2,000 VHS at one point, and then I got made homeless and I lost everything. So, for me, having this shed, for those who don't know, I do this in my garden shed, just having this shed, just having this little place where I can do these interviews and these, I won't even call them interviews, conversations, connections, a place where I can just come and do this, is an absolute blessing, because I through it all I've built it back up, and that's through a lot of it is through my wife and my family, but I think we need more positive role models, male positive role models. There aren't many out there, and the ones that are don't talk about this and this. Trauma isn't just a head problem or a heart problem, it's a soul problem. and you know, our personal trauma is involves other people, and it's their problem, and you know, that then comes into things like making amends to people that we'd harmed, you know, and admitting we were wrong and things like that, which we can't always do because of the toxicity that still sits there. And pride, that's a big one. Pride, you know,
pride and ego. You know, pride and ego, the two biggest things that hold a man back. I got brought down to my knees humbly by life, and I would urge anybody just to just know let life bring you to your knees. Talk it before that happens, because pride really does come before the fall. You know, I keep myself humble. I like I say, I study the stoicism, and two of the main beliefs in that is that you can only control two things, and that is your thoughts and how you react to those thoughts. So basically, I try and live my life with what other people think of me is none of my business. So don't bother with it. I just concentrate on what I'm doing. Even though half the time I do worry about what they're thinking about me, but I'll know, you know, like I act like I used to. I'll know, act erratically. I'll know, you know, I keep the lid on it a lot more. I keep a lot more grounded, and I I just deal with it a lot better than I used to. That's for sure. And that's thanks to, again, like you says, God as well. God keeps me humble as well.
yeah, that's one of my favorite sayings. I say that a lot. What other people think of me is none of my damn business.
Yeah,
That's one thing that can put us on his knees. How we think other people see us. It was always a problem for me. You know, I never wanted people to hate me, even when I was caving their head in. I wanted them to like me. You know,
yeah,
but trying to people please all the time, and we can't do that. You know, we just can't. What other people think about us is none of our damn business, and you know, it's mind over matter. If we don't mind, they don't matter, because there are going to be
absolutely.
people out there who want to see us fail. I know there are people out there that want to see me fail. There are, you know, I bless them. I really do. Um, you know, and there are people out there that don't believe that we can change. There are people out there that believe that these are masks that we're wearing and that we'll go back to the old life.
Yeah,
And all we can do is not let that become a heart problem, because when it becomes a heart problem, that's when it gets difficult to tackle. Yeah, head problem is a little easier, but a heart problem is more, you know, it's a spiritual problem. It's the, you know, and it's just that goes as deeper than any rabbit hole. And that's the thing that I find the most difficult. It's the thing that's brought me to my knees more times than anything. Trying to please other people, trying to please, you know, whether it's friends, family, even enemies. These things are not healthy. It's not a healthy way to live, to want to people please. You know, we need to focus on that connection with God, and if we've got that connection with God, then we can build that connection with other people, whether they like us or not. Because I think the biggest part of our stories as addicts, as living in trauma, as you know, as being ill, I think the biggest part of that is we lose who we are, and we don't know who we are, and we lose that connection with God. So to build that connection back with God, then we can build the connection with other people. You know, and it's verses like Romans 12:20 that really sits with me. Every time somebody really annoys me or upsets me or, you know, gets me steaming, you know, if your enemy hungers, feed him. If he thirsts, give him the best wine. For the Lord will rain down hot coals. It's not for me to let them get to me. It's for me to forgive them, to forgive myself, to love them, because that's the biggest thing that we're taught. You know, love everybody. Yeah. Even if it's the most difficult, because God has got that, and it's handing it over. And it's this whole concept of surrender, and surrendering to win. And as men, that's a really, really hard thing to, you know, no man wants to back down. That toxic part of him, you know, he don't want to back down. He wants to stand there and fight. You know, oh, you're going to fight till the end, you know. No, sometimes when the threat of the of loss is greater than that of staying and winning, then we need to surrender and actually surrendering our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. It's simple. I can't do it. Help me.
Exactly.
And that's basically what it would be in that crack house.
Yeah, that's what helped me a lot. The Bible. I picked up the Bible. I've read the Bible. As I say, I didn't get religious, but it's God. God always. Now I can look up at God and I can have conversations with God. I can pray with God now. I never ever used to do that before. I've got a tattoo of Jesus on my forearm, and I've got a tattoo to angel and a devil woman, which I cover up for my kids. But the real reason is because that Jesus used to take my scars for me when I was in low places, and that was how I dealt with it as well when I first came off it. So the self-harm side of things, nobody was talking about that either. You know, a man doing that, mentioned to be doing that, do that. But you touched on it as well. You touched on it, the toxic masculinity, the toxic stress. When men are stressed out, or women, or children especially, when we're stressed out, we're releasing cortisol. You know, that's a chemical that gets released when the big bear or the tiger is supposed to be in front of us. And that's released constantly if a man's stressed and depressed and bottling things up. And that's how men are more prone to have heart attacks, how men are more prone to have heart diseases, more prone to have suicidal tendencies, suicidal ideation, constantly walking about with cortisol on them. You know, it's not healthy. And just by turning yourself over to your fellow man, fellow brother, God, or a cause or a campaign, like a 70-30 campaign, like you say, I believe in connections, I believe in we wouldn't be having this conversation now unless it's meant to happen. Now I do believe in that now, and I try and live a considered life where there's no ego, it's all humility. It's about being thankful for what I do have and not wanting what I don't have. You know, I know for a fact that if I was to get the nicest new sports car, I'd be happy for so long before I wouldn't be happy because I've got a wee scratch on it or it would be dirty. And then it's not the key to happiness. You know, the key to happiness is understanding yourself and learning to love yourself. You know, if you can't love yourself, then you're not going to be able to love anybody else. And I can be a hypocrite there sometimes because there's days I absolutely hate myself. And you know, but there's days I actually do argue myself and say to myself, you know what, stop it, because you're doing well, you're on the right track. I truly believe that I am on God's path. I do believe that, Jack. I don't know where it'll take me. I still don't know where it'll take me, but I'm enjoying the journey. That's for sure.
It's a you know, it's as a journey. It's so worth it, but it is. We sometimes have to take it blind, and I think that is the scary bit. Going into it, not knowing what's going to happen. Working a 12-step, we look at it a day at a time. But I'm now at the point where we have to look at it a little bit more than that. But it's, I don't really know how to describe it. It's really just being a sort of conduit for God. I know that the God of my understanding has a plan for me, just like he has a plan for everybody else. I have a great church that have helped me understand that plan. This is a massive part of that plan. Building connections that I couldn't even do pre-COVID. Since COVID hit, since like October last year, really, when I started this journey of podcasting, just to sort of help myself build my confidence up. It's so many connections. It's mind blowing. Things that have happened are almost supernatural in the way that they've happened. And it's been a scary thing.
I can relate to that.
A lot of men don't admit that they're scared. That wasn't a problem when it was fight or flight for me, but I'm quite happy to admit I still get scared sometimes. It's a normal way of life, and we have to realize this, that getting fear is a normal part of life, but fear, is something that we can tackle at its core. We get scared for a reason. It's a chemical reaction. It's a body reaction. So, it's there as a tool, just like our past is there as a tool. Our knowledge is there as a tool. Knowledge combined is just, that's how we teach. This is as much as a learning journey for me as it is a teaching journey. And I think,
I've lived with fear my full life, and there was so long where I hated myself for that part of it. But then I realised now that there's legitimate reasons to be fearful. One of the things I'm terrified is the way that will go. I'm not actually feared of death itself. I haven't. I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say I'm not afraid of that at all. But how I go, because of what happened to my stepfather and the way he went, that terrifies me, the way that'll go. It terrifies me if anything happened to my children. So there's genuine fears there. But even they fears, guys don't even come out and admit that they're fears of them kind of things. It's like, I'm not fear of anything. Everybody talks, there's no fear of anything. It's like typical Scotsman, stereotypical, whatever. But we're feared. Guys are scared. They've got their fears. And if we can start talking about them, we'll see a big, big difference, like you say. A lot more people start opening up. A lot more people start talking.
Yeah. I think a big one for that for me is prayer. So somebody asked me a few weeks ago, what purpose does prayer serve? This person's they say they're an atheist. I would call them more of an agnostic. I'm not bright enough to be an atheist, to be honest. I don't think many people are, but prayer. He said to me, he said, you're just praying into nothing. Well, for me, prayer is about restoring, like we say about connection. It's restoring that connection. It's a proven fact that when we pray, we relax. When we relax, our bodies start to heal, our mind starts to heal, our spirit starts to heal. Being prayerful in the right way, pushing forward, can just open up so many things that are supernatural and that are natural, or that are naturally supernatural. And supernaturally natural. It's it's a big thing in my life at the minute. Prayer, sending out them arrows, because when we pray, we get positive thoughts. Those positive thoughts help us to push on, and this can help trigger healing. I didn't understand that before, but it's only through prayer and meditation and not just looking to God, but looking into myself, that I've been able to sort of become emotionally more stable, more balanced, which is a big thing. The longest I've ever been sober was 12 years, but that was dry, for a lot of the time. I wouldn't recommend it. I do want to, I do want to talk a bit about suicide. I know we've touched on it. And I just feel that I need to say out loud that I know there are people out there that are really struggling with it. And you're not alone. And if you are struggling with it, please contact me through this site, contact Jay, just speak to someone, because suicide is part of that disconnection. It's the heart problem, it's the soul problem, feeling so disconnected from everything. I've tried suicide so many times, and it's really something that I feel really, really strongly about. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about it tonight when you suggested it, because it affects so many people, and you may feel that you're alone. You may feel invalidated. I want to tell you now, I validate you. I want you to know that you are loved by me. I know it feels like the hardest thing right now to just admit where you are. But please, I would rather talk you through it than give a speech at your funeral. If there is anything in this program, in any of my programs, that has really hit you, please get in touch if there's any questions. I know everybody, and I know Jay will quite happily help and just assure you that there is another way. There is another way. That's you feeling disconnected to the point of suicide. It's a hard thing. Please don't go through it alone. I know you feel like you're alone. You're not. Trust me, you're not. So many times I've been there. The last time I wrote the suicide note, I wanted to do it in the most violent way that I could. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but and it's only because somebody knocked on my door that I didn't. It's not always possible to knock on your door, but if you're passing this, if you're scrolling through, you see it, and you're hearing what we're saying, please reach out.
No, please do. It's something that's affected me. I've lost countless cousins. I've lost 2 cousins to to suicide, 2 cousins to drugs. I'm actively trying to keep one cousin alive and out who's tried to take his own life just recently. You know, and he's hurt himself real bad. He's in a bad way. You know, guys, I know, and women, if you're out there and you're feeling suicidal now, you're withdrawn, you're not engaging properly with people, you'll know this. And what Jack says is, speak out, reach out to us. We'll at least point you in the right direction, and we're there for you. And like Jack says, he loves you. I care for you all day. This is why I do this. I do this to reach out to that other man, to reach out to my fellow man, and let them know it's okay to talk. You know, it's okay to speak out. You're valued. You do deserve to be here. And whatever battles it is that you've gone through, there are people out there who have got the tools to help you get through it and equip you with the tools to carry on. We need you here. We need you here. Your family needs you. Your friends need you. There is somebody that needs you, you know, and we all care about you. We do. This isn't a lip service. Certainly no lip service coming from Jack. It's no lip service coming from me. You know, it's a blight on our nation. It's a damnation on a nation, and it's just absolutely, it's horrific to know that people are going through it and alone and not talking to anybody. When I've seen firsthand the amount of men that have spoke out and turned their lives around because of it, and women. So please, do what Jack's saying, do what we're saying, reach out, talk out, speak out, even if it's to either of us, and we'll get you into somebody else.
Yeah. Because you might not feel strong, but you're stronger than you think. You're stronger than you think.
Yep.
And we
it
both
real
know
strength to talk out. Yeah. Everybody's stronger than they think. Everybody's stronger than they think. When I tried to take my life, twice I've tried it, but the petrol station was the most prominent. I didn't think I was strong. But looking back now, the way I've came back to it, if I'd have known that night the strength that I had in me, then I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have put my family through the scare they went through. I wouldn't have put I would and then nearly destroyed everything. The tools that you do have the tools at your disposal. You've got the strength deep inside you. You just need somebody to come along and give you that wee helping hand. And we're here for you. We really are.
Yeah. Because what I want you to know is that trauma, depression, addiction, these are all things that are deceptive. They bring the lies into your life and they convince you that there's only one way, and there isn't. You know, there are lots of ways, and the big way for myself and for Jay is a God. That's a big part of our recovery, and it's the reason we sat here today. But even if you just can't think of a God, or I just want you to, even if you don't think that you're praying to anybody or anything, prayer is such a wonderful tool. Prayer, meditation, or whatever. I was sat in a crack house 26th of June 2014. I was off my nut around about 10 o'clock at night. And I've always had a concept of God in my life, but I wasn't sure that I believed in him, or I wasn't sure how I could believe in this what I saw as a spoiled child with an ant farm and a magnifying glass. but I couldn't live in the pain that I was living in anymore. I was losing everything. I was losing my daughter. I was losing my family. I was losing my life. And I just said, God, I don't even know if you do exist. I don't even know who you are. I can't even call you Father because I don't believe it. But God, if you do exist, please either take my life now or take away this thirst, take away this hunger for drugs, and take away this pain because I cannot live in this anymore. And I fell asleep. And I woke up just after midnight on the 27th of June, 2014. But there, for the grace of God, I haven't used since. And I know for a fact that on my own, I could not give up. I tried so many times. You know, it was always one crutch. It was either drink or drugs or whatever. It was, you know, it was always something. And, you know, I could not. I was begging people to help me. But I'd lost, you know, people had lost all respect for me. And he took that away. He took that will, that want of drugs away. And he can do it for you. It's not just drugs. You know, we get, I think people think that they see addiction as just, you know, drink, drugs, gambling, pornography. It's these, you know, all these things have affected me in my life. Yeah. But, you know, we get addicted to bad behavior, to negative emotions, to how we treat other people. These all become habit.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is focus on build a good habit, like normalizing talking to people, listening to people. I'm not talking about just listening to people. I'm talking about listening to people. We need to normalize when we can get back there, hugging, because, you know, for me, that's one thing that I've really missed during this pandemic. For the people that I really care about, you know, in my church, not being able to hug, it's a connection thing. We need to normalize connection. It's so easy when somebody says, "You all right?" or "How are you feeling?" and you're like, "Well, yeah, I'm all right." And there are times that I've had to pull myself up on it and go, get honest with the people and say, "Do you know what? I'm not all right. I'm not feeling all right. I'm not feeling good." And sometimes prayer helps and sometimes it doesn't. You know, not necessarily there and then, but, you know, we need to normalize these things. We need to normalize men telling each other we love each other, because it's not gay, you know, it's not negative, it is biblical.
Yep.
We are commanded to love one another with everything that we have. You know, I'm not becoming, you know, I'm not getting all religious, and I'm not, but to love someone with your heart, your mind, your soul, unconditionally, you know, it helps so much, because if you love someone and they hurt you, you can love yourself enough to not have unforgiveness, because that is poison. You know, we need to normalize forgiveness. you know, and I've forgiven some proper clangers. You know, I mean, I've lost people to suicide, to murder over these past few years, and it's hard. I almost lost myself. And unforgiveness comes to self as well. You need to forgive yourself.
And that's the hardest one. That's the hardest one, I think, is well, for me anyway, it was the hardest. It was forgiving myself for all the bad stuff that I'd done, and even the day up until today, I still have that battle with myself, saying, you know, I shouldn't have done some of the stuff I've done. But you've got to forgive yourself, Jack. You've got to forgive yourself. You've got to say to yourself, you know, that was the old self. That was the I can't be defined by that old self, because if I am, then I'm going to turn into that old self and go back down the old tracks. You've got to embrace the new you, the humble you, the you that's praying or affirming to yourself that you are worthy, you are beautiful, you are loved. You know, you've got to embrace that. And like you say, to tell another man you love him, you know, there's this misconception that only gay people can do that. It's wrong. We're hardwired as social animals to love other men and women. You know, it's natural. It's the most natural thing in the world. You know, you love your brother, you're not gay. You know, we need to get back to that society where we can actually openly, you know, say to each other we love each other. And we're a long way away from it, Jack, especially up in Scotland. We're a long way away from it. But we are making inroads. And that's the main thing, I suppose, eh?
It is. It is. You know, it's how are we supposed to know that we're supposed to have that connection, that we're supposed to love other people, you know, love people, you know, love our fellow man if we're not told. Sometimes we just need to be told. I need to be told, because I'm a bit thick at times. I don't always pick up on it, and sometimes it takes fall after fall after fall for me to go, hang on a minute, there's a step there. You know, I need to watch it. So you know, it's learned behavior. If we can learn to be bad, like we did, we can learn to be good. It's not necessarily about unlearning bad habits. It's about learning new habits and new things that will help us get through.
That's it. I mean, everything's, well, unless it's due to genes or neuroscience, everything's a learned behaviour. So we can unlearn it. We can unlearn the fact that we've been hardwired not to talk out in public. We can unlearn the fact that we've got to be strong. We can unlearn all that stuff, and like you say, reprogram ourselves and reprogram society to start changing and being more open to it and talking about it.
Yeah, because if we don't talk, how are people supposed to know? You know,
Exactly.
how we're supposed to know if we don't talk? You know, it's communication, connection. Communication is connection.
Of course.
You know, we need to learn better to communicate, really, because it's one of the things that we sort of lose in our own minds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's one of the most fundamental aspects of being a human being.
It is. It's part of the human condition. You know, we make mistakes. You know.
You know, I always say, if we're not making mistakes, we're not growing. If we're not failing, we're not learning. You know, it's natural to make mistakes. It's natural to fail. You know, these things are meant to happen. So don't beat yourself up when it happens, because it means you're learning. It means you're actually doing something in the world. You know, you might have failed. That means you're trying. You know, you're winning. You know, it's the way you look at it. It's the way you frame it. It's the way you see that adversity. And almost every adversity can be turned towards an advantage if you just look at it from a different angle.
Yeah, you know, we learn from our mistakes. We learn from, just like we learn from our wins, really. You know, the thing for me that I've learned is it's so easy to regret your past. I've done so many things to hurt people, to hurt myself, to hurt my family. And I used to regret and shame and guilt was the one thing that really drove me. So, you know, not to regret your past, but don't wish, you know, you can't shut the door on it. You know, your past is your past. It's there. You know, you can try and paint over it as much as you like, but it's still there under that paint. So, you know, we need to. I use my past as an aid, as a tool to help other people understand these things, just like Jay does, and you know, other people that come on this podcast. You know, you might not think that you've got a story there. But everybody's got a story. Everybody's got experience, strength, and hope. Even when you feel hopeless, the first part of that is hope. You know, there's always hope in hopeless. And I think that it's easy to forget that. It's so easy to forget that because we get tied up in our own thoughts, and we often think that we're the center of the world, and it's God, why are you doing this to me? You know, the world doesn't revolve around us. We just move through the world, albeit slower than other people. You know, and it's just getting up time and time again. You know, it's the surrendering when we need to be able to recover, recuperate, recenter. Yeah, and just, you know, it's a daily battle. It is a daily battle. And it doesn't matter, for me, it doesn't matter whether it's 9 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If that day's going crap, we should really start it again. Don't matter what time it is, you know, we start that day again. I don't always live by my own advice. I'm still sort of, you know, learning in this, coming up to seven years learning in this. But I think that if we just keep our eye on God and just keep our hearts open, so easy as a man to keep it closed and to keep our mind closed and to have that just narrow view, and we need to widen that and stop being, you know, it's so easy to tell ourselves to man up, so easy to stop ourselves from crying. I know I've done that. I need a good cry. I really do need a good cry. I haven't had a good cry in a long time because it's just so freeing. You know, there are times, yeah, I'm a bit of a soft. Do watch a, you know, I'll watch a sad film with you know, with the wife, and I'll get the tears in my eyes, and I'll feel myself going, and I want a good cry, and then I'll block it. And then days after, I'll be like, why did you do that? Why did you block it? You know,
let it go.
Because it's that toxicity.
Yeah, of course.
It hurts.
You just bottled that back up, haven't you? You just stuck it away for it to build up with all the other stuff that's built up in there from another day. You know, I've got the opposite condition, and I wish I could cry. And I understand for obviously the neuroscience stuff and how early it was, that's probably part of it. But I think you can count on one hand how many times I've cried in the last 20 odd years. I wish I could cry. You know, I really do. You've got guys out there who'll not cry, and I'm sitting here saying I wish I could cry because the times I get choked up, and like you say, it just instantly my body instantly stops myself from doing it, and it's no good. It's no good. We need to get to a point in society where we can just freely just let ourselves cry when that urge comes on or when the body tells you. And if you see another guy crying, being able to walk up to them and put your arm around them and say, I think it's all right. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, normalise that. Normalise asking someone if they're all right, and then listening, and then really asking them if they're all right. And actually, if someone asks you if you're all right and you're not feeling all right, and you say, yeah, I'm all right, normalise saying, actually, no, I'm not feeling all right, and I don't know how you can help me. Even if you don't know how people can help you, you know, I don't know if you can help me at the minute, but just be honest. Honest with
Tell the truth.
Honest with yourself.
Yeah, that's what I've started doing now. When I'm no good, I'll tell folk I'm no good. I'll say I'm no good, and if they ask why, I'll say, well, you want the long or the short version? I'll give you the short version if you want. But there you go, and I'm honest with them that way. And that way, nobody expects. It sends a message back to that person that, well, if he can be honest that he can't do it, and for that reason that he's not feeling up to it because he's got that on his plate, then maybe I should try that, and maybe I can do that. But then we've still got this battle at work with this the stigma and bosses and all the rest that we need to battle. But we can only battle that by doing that, Jack, by by us starting and by other people doing it, and that doing what you said, and that's actually getting past that automatic barrier of I'm okay, get past that, and you'll soon find that and when people ask you, like you say, if you're all right, tell the truth. Yeah, tell the truth. If you're not all right, tell them you're not all right. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, it's about I've spoken a lot about acknowledging. Sometimes you need other people to acknowledge, to validate that to you, but you need to do that yourself as well. You need to acknowledge your feelings and validate your feelings. Yes, I'm feeling like this, and this is the reason that I'm feeling like this. That is normal. The way that we went about it before and going, puffing on a pipe or, banging it in the vein or whatever way it was, or drinking it away. That's not the normal.
No.
We made it the normal. We made it our response. That was our response, our immediate response, our fight or flight, to pick up. But actually, to validate it yourself, to acknowledge it yourself, that should be the normal response. There are people out there that are very emotionally open, very emotionally stable, have so much emotional intelligence. It's great. And then there are people like me that it doesn't come naturally to, but we have to learn, and I'm building that emotional intelligence. It's a journey. It's a fight. It's not easy. We're going to make mistakes, but all we can do is normalize putting your hand out and helping other people. Yeah. We're going to have your wife on tomorrow.
Yeah, my wife on tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Tell me about your wife. Just sort of introduce her for those that are going to tune in tomorrow.
My wife she's been the rock, man. She's been my rock. My first memory, I got asked at the hospital what my first memory was, and I says it was seeing Angela at 12-year-old. She says that can't be your first memory. So I had to dig away back and get my first memory. It was me standing in front of a door waiting on my dad coming in. So Angela plays a big part of my full life, really. When I was 12, I moved to West Lothian. She was 10. she was the first lassie I saw, and I can remember her looking back at me, and I thought, it's kind of like that, well, cheesy love at first sight kind of thing as a kid, puppy love. And I thought, I'm going to go out with her. As it turns out, she duped me twice at like 14 and 13. And then I thought, well, now I'm 16, I'm too old for her. So I disappeared for a couple of years. And I remember driving down the street, and she was walking along the street, and she was looking really good. And I stopped, and I said, what age are you? And she's like, I'm 16 in November. I was like, right, well, I was only 17 at the time. I was like, well, in November, I was like, I'm coming down to get you. She's like, well, I've got a boyfriend. I was like, I'm not bored. I didn't know at this point, and this is where you get the story of the month, who the boyfriend was. I didn't want to get that away, but my wife was, she was, her stories out there, she was groomed and stuff happened to her. And when I got with her, we both kind of told each other our stories, and we had it for the families, and we tried to protect the families, but all we done was kind of, you talk about addiction, we ended up addicted to miscarriages, and we addicted to miscarriages. So my wife ended up being a breakthrough for miscarriages for women as well. And she's been a rock for me, and what she's went through, and what you saying, women are stronger of the two species. She's definitely stronger of the two of us. She's just off the back of that court case. It lasted 5 years. I don't even know any other court cases that have lasted that long. An appeal two times at court where we were told to go home, two court cases where we were told to go home, and then the third court case where she finally gave our evidence. And I'll let her tell the story for that in the morning. But my wife, she's got a heart of gold. She really has. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. And I think she'll probably say the same thing. The two of us have kept each other. We've leaned on each other when we needed each other, and been there for each other when we needed each other. And we've had our moments, but you know what? We've been together for now 20, 24 years, I think. I better not get it wrong. It was our 21st wedding anniversary this year, the paper one. So, she's an amazing woman. She's really inspiring. She's inspired me so much. The strength and resilience on her is just phenomenal. She's had a tough life, but as you'll find at the morning, she's a tough character as well.
Really, I look forward to it, mate. I look forward to it. I'm going to wind up. If you stay online, I'm going to wind up this program, and then we'll have a quick debrief afterwards after I cut the live feed. All right. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. I know it's been a difficult one tonight. It's really challenged me. Right deep into the core. I knew it would. I look forward to tomorrow night. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and everybody that shared this throughout the day. I think this is the most shared episode that we've had up to date. As we said, tomorrow I have Angela, Jay's wife, talking about her life, and then on Thursday I have James Jeffries, my can sponsor, who's going to come on, and we're going to talk about adoption and how that's affected us in our lives, and sort of some of the biblical parts of that, how the Romans saw adoption, and how we can deal with some of these traumas and finding out that we're adopted. So yeah, that'll be another amazing one. Maybe I'd go in, but I do implore you to come along and have a listen. But also, if you want to join in, if you have experience with adoption, if you're an adopted or fosterer or fostered, then please let me know, and we'll happily get you on via Zoom. So yeah, guys, I shall see you tomorrow. See you guys.